This is the Honor Magic V5, and it has exactly 1 week to impress me. To give it the fairest chance, I've actually decided to move my life away from my iPhone 15 Pro Max to the V5, and it's going to be my daily driver for a whole week. So let's start off with the why. It's safe to say that I've been a bit of an Apple fanboy for about 6 years now. I started off with the iPhone XR all the way to the 15 Pro Max that I have today. But after watching Apple's iPhone event last week, I'm kind of getting a little bit of flavour fatigue. Outside of new camera tech and the really thin design of the iPhone Air, there really doesn't seem like there's been a ton of innovation or anything really new from Apple for many, many years. And that is definitely not the case when it comes to the Honor Magic V5. Now, I don't expect this week to be all smooth sailing. I know that moving from iOS to Android can be a particularly difficult process, especially as I'm so ingrained into the walled garden that is the Apple ecosystem. Hell, I even managed to get most of my family moved over to iPhone just so I can use things like iMessage. But with the rise of RCS chat in the last couple of years, I'm actually expecting this to be slightly less painful than it perhaps once was. So let's go ahead and rewind the clock back to yesterday when I first got the device, and I can give you my first impressions and talk about that moving process. So one of the first things I noticed about this device was just how impossibly thin this thing felt. Seriously, it's actually incredible. Holding it in your hand, it kind of does feel like it shouldn't be this thin. When unfolded, this guy is just 4.2 millimeters thin. I have the black model here, so it is ever so slightly thicker. If you went with the ivory white model, it's 0.1 mil thinner, so 4.1 millimeters. And honestly, in the hand, I really don't think you're going to notice that 0.1 mil. And when folded, it comes in at 9 millimeters thin. This is actually still thinner than my iPhone 15 Pro Max that I've had before, and I actually do think it's one of the thinnest phones that I've ever held, especially when unfolded, but still when folded as well. It's lighter than my iPhone as well, coming in at 222 grams, or 217 if you've got that ivory white model. It's definitely a striking design, and I actually don't think it could go any thinner, only because of that USB-C port. You're kind of really pushing the limits of just how thin you can get this thing. And sure, this phone does have a lot of camera junk in the trunk. Seriously, the camera bump on this thing is actually almost the same amount as the phone's thickness when open. It's big, it's bulky, but honestly I don't mind it too much because of the camera tech that's in here. And we'll talk about that later on when I get to all of the camera testing that I hope to do this week. Honor was nice enough to include a cable and even a case in the box to go on the phone. Now, typically with a phone that is this thin, you might not want to put a case on it, but when you're spending £1,600 on a phone, you're going to want to protect it. And actually, I quite like how the case looks. It doesn't add a ton of bulk. Sure, it adds some, but I'd rather that than have this thing break on me. So just how painful was that move from iOS to Android? Well, actually it wasn't as bad as I first thought. Upon setting up the V5, it asked me to connect my cable and download the Moving to Android app to an iPhone. From there, it basically asked me what apps I wanted to copy across, as well as things like messages, images, and even some settings. I then left it for half an hour and it asked me to move my WhatsApp as well. It's really important to note that when moving your WhatsApp, you have to do it at this point. You can't come back to it later in the settings or anything like that. It just doesn't work. It's a pain, and it's something that I realized myself after setting up the device. So I had to go ahead and factory reset the V5 and do the whole process again, at this time ensuring that I do the WhatsApp migration as well. The WhatsApp moving was a small annoyance, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm actually pretty impressed by how easy it was to move everything from one device to the other. Even things like my iCloud email moved across without too much issue. Sure, you have to go to iCloud.com and you have to create an app-specific password, but it's easy to do and actually pretty seamless. Logging into all of my different accounts took me about 3 hours, which honestly I'd say is pretty good. I was expecting to have to spend a couple of days setting this thing up, but I really didn't, and by last night I was ready to start using this thing properly, and I cannot wait to share some of my thoughts with you.
A few moments later.
So let's talk about day-to-day usage. For the most part, when doing things like checking WhatsApp or messaging people, maybe even doing a little bit of social media scrolling, I did so when in its folded up kind of form factor. The main reason for it is it's just more comfortable to use that way. If you're gonna have this thing unfolded, it kind of is a two-handed device, and it just really isn't practical to use it when you're walking around town or on the move. Thankfully though, I really didn't mind doing that because this outer screen is actually pretty good. It's typical of folding phones of the past that they were just a little bit too thin and a little bit too tall, and they were pretty impractical to use. The screen was just a little bit too small or of an awkward shape for apps to really properly adapt to it. But that's not the case with the front display on the V5. In fact, this is one of the best displays I've seen for a cover display. It's 120Hz, it's OLED, and it is just absolutely gorgeous. It can even get up to 5,000 nits of peak brightness, so you can use this outdoors without any real worry of not being able to read the screen. The resolution on the front here is 1060 by 2376. It's plenty bright and detailed enough for daily use and for the general scrolling of social media and all of that sort of stuff. And with that OLED and 120Hz support, it's actually pretty good for watching vertical content as well, such as TikTok or Instagram Reels. It really didn't feel like a compromise watching it on that screen as opposed to opening it up. Typically, I would unfold the device for things like media consumption or multitasking, and that's kind of where this phone comes into its own. It's where, for me, Magic OS really did shine the most. You can kind of just open it up and at any point in any of your apps, pull down from the top, placing it to the left or to the right, and it starts a multitasking session, allowing you to choose a secondary app to move to the opposite side of the screen. You can have up to 2 apps open at once and a floating window for something like TikTok or YouTube as well. Primarily, I really only kept it to 2 kind of apps at a time, but that's because my eyes aren't great and anything smaller than 2 apps at a time was just a little too small to actually read on this display. I actually wrote a lot of the bullet points for this video in this multitasking mode, having my Notes app open on one side and GSM Arena open on the other one so I can kind of copy specs across with ease. And that's where it truly shines. As this week goes on, I expect to use the multitasking a lot more in tasks such as kind of reading recipes or copying things to a shopping list, which I will be doing in preparation for Saturday, my son's birthday. While using this internal display as well for things like films, games, and multitasking, I did kind of forget that it was a folding phone. I really didn't notice that crease, and that is definitely a good thing. In the past, this crease has been pretty noticeable in folding phones, but not here on the V5. I did find though, over longer periods of time, particularly if I'm watching longer films or YouTube videos, the phone did become a little uncomfortable to hold. It's just a little bit too big to be a phone size, but it's not big enough to be fully tablet size, so it was just a little bit of kind of an awkward middle ground. It wasn't the most comfortable for long periods of use. The internal display, in terms of specs, is a 7.95-inch display. Again, it's AMOLED, it's 120Hz, and it's got 5,000 nits of peak brightness. The resolution is equally higher too, as you would expect, at 2172 by 2532. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is my favourite screen on not just a smartphone, but also a tablet. It looks absolutely great for both media consumption and the general scrolling of socials. Settling down in the evening to play some mobile games, it quite quickly became apparent to me that this internal display really is where it's at. Games like Destiny Rising truly are just incredibly immersive on this massive internal display. That's thanks in part to that 120Hz refresh rate. Closing up the phone and using it in the standard clamshell style, the games still ran and looked beautiful, but they kind of just felt a little bit more cramped because it wasn't using the full size of the screen. One thing that did kind of bring me out of the action of some of these games though was the speakers. There is a dual speaker system here, and though they sound okay, they do kind of lack in the bass department and overall clarity. These are not my favourite speakers on a smartphone. In fact, I actually feel they are lacking quite significantly. when you're holding them in in the opened up mode, you've got one along the bottom here and one along the top here. So kind of when you're holding it, you're going to be knocking out one of the two speakers at all times. And it just felt a little bit tinny. That might be because I was completely covering them, but maybe that's something to think about. Speakers aren't great here. I would recommend using headphones where possible. After what I would call a pretty standard day of usage for me, which is moderate to heavy for some people, that includes playing some games in the evening, using the phone on a day-to-day basis by texting, flicking through social media, opening up apps and that sort of thing, I ended the day with about 20% battery. That's pretty good. It's not the 2-day battery that they said it would get, but that may well be because of the usage that I had. So, for example, when I went into the battery settings, I actually noticed that the majority of my battery was being used up by my phone services. Looking into this, it might just be because I have terrible signal in my office. My phone is constantly polling to find a new network and a good signal. Turning off 5G, I appear to have got a much better battery out of it, so that's something to keep in mind. You might just want to switch networks as and how you need. The battery life is still incredible though. That's thanks to the silicon carbon battery, which is 5,820 milliamp hours. It is a relatively new battery technology, so we don't really know how it's going to hold up over time. We do know that the longevity of silicon carbon batteries isn't as high as a more standard lithium ion. So I'd be interested to know after perhaps a year or two if this phone still has the stellar battery that it does right now.
Eternity later.
Okay, so it's been about 5 days now since I got the Honor Magic V5 in hand, and I just wanted to talk to you about my biggest fear when it came from moving to iOS to Android, and that was losing iMessage. You see, I use iMessage a lot with both my friends and my family. I've basically moved everyone I know over to Apple because of this feature. It allowed me to send photos, videos, voice messages, and react to those kinds of messages. I knew that RCS was a thing on Android, but I didn't know how good it was going to be. Thankfully though, I've actually realized, and quite quickly, that RCS is incredibly good. It is basically iMessage, but you can do it across all of your devices, from Android to iOS. Really, the only difference you're going to see is on the iMessage side, you're going to be one of those green bubble kids rather than the blue bubble. Really, that's the only difference I've noticed. I can still send reactions, I can still send photos and videos. It really didn't feel like a compromise anymore, and I can actually see myself continuing to use a Magic V5 because I'm not missing out on those features. Another interesting feature that I kind of thought I would miss is a universal clipboard. So if you have a Mac and an iPhone and an iPad, you'll already know what this feature is. Copy a piece of text from one device, you can paste it on basically all of your other devices. I use it a lot, and I kind of use it subconsciously. I don't think about it. So I knew it was something that I was going to miss on the Android side. Technically, you can do it on Windows pretty natively, but I don't use a Windows machine. I still use a Mac. So I had to look for a third-party solution, and that's where Alt-C comes in. Alt-C is basically a way to copy your clipboard directly to your phone and vice versa. It works very, very similarly to that of the universal clipboard, but it just requires you to press a different button. In this case, Alt-C, Alt-V, instead of Control-C, Control-V. It works really, really well, and is just another thing that I was expecting to miss or to lose out on, but I really didn't. The kinds of things that Apple does really well, there are custom solutions for it built directly into Android. I think it might be finally time to talk about the cameras, because these guys are a pretty big deal. Now, you get three main lenses. You obviously get the wide angle, which is a 50 megapixel f1.2 23mm, but you also get the 64 megapixel 2.5 f 70mm periscope telephoto lens, which is basically there for your optical zoom. It will do 3 times optical before it starts using digital. And you've also got a 50 megapixel f2 13mm ultra-wide autofocus sensor. All three of these sensors are actually incredible on their own. They will record up to 4K 30fps, or even down to 1080p at 3060 fps. That is both in 10-bit and 8-bit color spaces. You also get things like ESI and OIS, so image stabilization really isn't going to be an issue whether you're using the front or the rear cameras on a Magic V5. So this is an example of the video quality from the front-facing cameras on the Honor Magic V5. Honestly, I'm pretty impressed. It seems fairly colour accurate, it's nice and smooth, and the stabilisation is, well, just incredible. Now, let me tell you, when I say the images blew me away, they really did blow me away. Their colours felt accurate, the detail was pretty incredible, and overall I just loved how the images looked that came out of this camera. Honor's AI-assisted super zoom is so cool, pretty useless to me. You can basically zoom up to 100 times and it will then use AI to upscale any of the detail that's missing. It does an okay job for the most part, but it definitely just kind of fills in blobs of colour here and there. And you can see that in the image that I took here. It's a fun feature, but I really don't think I would ever actually use it in my day-to-day life. Weirdly though, when you're switching between the three main cameras on the back, you are getting this weird colour shift. They aren't all tuned to be exactly the same. I don't know why Honor chose to do this. I hope it's something they can fix in a software update, because you do get this weird colour shift that just doesn't feel right. I think though, actually perhaps the most impressive thing about these cameras is being able to use the external screen to take selfies and to do other things. So you do have two selfie cameras, one on the front of the device and one on the inside screen. They are fine, but if you want the best looking selfies that you can go ahead and turn the phone around and use these external cameras using this side as your viewfinder. It produces really, really nice selfies and portrait modes with a natural looking bokeh and blur. Also, I think perhaps the bigger thing is you can actually use the external display to display different animations. So for example, a cat or a dog playing. And it's really cute. And the idea is that a child will see this and go, hey, look at that, and continue to be engaged with the phone so you can get some of the best pictures that you can. Now, I actually found this to be incredibly useful for my son, both while we were out this week and on his birthday, because it meant that he was continually looking at the camera, and we got some really nice, fairly natural images of him that I think I'll remember for a really long time. As a software skin, I think Magic OS is my favourite only because it's so close to iOS. There's a lot of features from iOS that have come across here that make me just feel like home. There's no app drawer, everything just sits on the main screen. It's really easy to customize and make it look exactly how you want. There's a ton of AI features which personally I'm really not using, like deepfake detection. It's there, I don't use it, I just don't see a point in it. But overall, I really can't fault the OS experience too much. I just wish there was slightly better integration with things like the Mac for sending files manually. You can do it, it's just a little bit of a convoluted process.
Several bad puns later.
So I guess it's now time to answer the question, am I going to be staying with the Honor Magic V5 or will I be moving back to iOS? Well, I think it's safe to say from this video exactly where my heart is, and that is with the V5. I'm genuinely so impressed by this phone. Almost every aspect of it is nigh on perfect in my book. Sure, there are a few things that I wish it did differently, but overall, it is a significant leap forwards in what I wanted from a smartphone. It was innovative, it's different, it's fun, it's stylish. It's all the things that Apple really aren't doing right now. Maybe this will change next year when Apple release the iPhone Fold, but for now, I'm sticking with the V5, and if you want to pick up your own, then I'll leave a link in the description down below so you can buy it yourself. I would recommend going with the gold edition. Though I like the black here, I do kind of wish I'd gone gold. Anyway, guys, why don't you let me know what you think of the Honor Magic V5 in the on the comment section down below. And of course, while you're down there, why don't you go ahead and get subscribed as well, because it genuinely does mean the world to me. Also, let me know if you're enjoying this kind of more casual, unscripted kind of video. It does mean that I fumble over my words every so often, but I feel like it's a more genuine reaction to the product and gives me a chance to properly explain and show to you exactly what my thoughts are on each of these products. Anyway, my name has been Robert. This has been Bite Size Clue, and I will catch you in the next one. Adios.